So Brian is a former pastor and college English teacher, an author, speaker, activist, and networker among innovative Christian leaders. His dozen-plus books include A New Kind of Christianity, A Generous Orthodoxy, and most recently, Naked Spirituality. He and his wife Grace live in Florida, as I mentioned, and have 4 adult children and 2 granddaughters. Brian is an avid wildlife and outdoors enthusiast who believes God's first language is this amazing universe. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, and we look forward to your presentation, Brian.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you all. I first want to thank you for your interest and participation tonight. I want to say again, I plan to stop several times, maybe talk for 10 to 15 minutes, and then stop and take a look at the questions that have come in and respond to the questions that you're asking. I just want to be sure that you all feel that that the questions you have and the interest you have, that you get a chance to raise, so we can be I can be as responsive as possible to each of you. I wanted to start. I also should say that the slides will be available, and I'm going to move very, very quickly through the slides, just as kind of a background to what we'll be talking about. I also wanted to say that I know that church leaders, both staff and lay leaders, have a lot of things to be concerned about. Finances, attendance, conflict, so many issues. I was a pastor for 24 years, so I certainly understand this. And sometimes the main thing slips away from being the main thing. And that's why I was happy to be able to address this topic of how we actually help people in the spiritual life, really getting to the core of the matter in the spiritual life. And so what I'd like to do in our time together is I'd like to actually try to do 2 things. In the first half hour or so, I'd like to give you an overview of a way of thinking about the spiritual life. And then in the second half, I would like to talk about spiritual practices that I think are appropriate in each of 4 stages in the spiritual life. And this is based on a book that I wrote called Naked Spirituality. There have been a large number of theorists, both Christian and secular, who have had a lot to say about human development, stages of human development. In addition to the ones you see on your screen there are many, many others. And I was originally exposed to a different schema of human development when I was a college English teacher before I was a pastor. You'll see the third name down there is William Perry, whose work was extremely influential and helpful in my own thinking as an educator and then as a pastor, and also just helpful in understanding my own spiritual life. What I've done is tried to take the thinking of a whole lot of these scholars and theorists, and in some ways synthesize them, simplify them, and especially tailor the things they're writing to the spiritual life. And in so doing, I'm going to talk about 4 stages. When we're done, I'll come back and I'll talk about a stage 0 that'll really give us a 5th stage. But the first stage is where children enter adolescence. We're going to call it the stage of simplicity. Now, it's important for you to know that in my thinking, it's not that we need to rush to the last stage as quickly as possible. The fact is the first stages are extremely important. And in fact, if we don't learn the lessons and gain the skills of the early stages, we will struggle as we go through the later stages. I think all of us maybe who study math in school, we realize if you don't get adding and subtracting down, then multiplying and dividing are a problem. If you don't get that basic arithmetic down, algebra is a problem. If you don't get algebra down, trigonometry and so on will be a problem. So these early stages are really important. And this first stage of simplicity is the stage of dualism. It's a stage of the world being divided into the good guys and the bad guys, our side and their side. Who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's evil. There's a real focus in stage one on authority figures. And those authority figures work as gatekeepers and give the gift of belonging to a group. And in stage one, we're very interested in belonging. So this is the basic stage of dualism that I think children enter into and that carries into adolescence. A lot of people never leave stage one. And in fact, a lot of churches don't allow people to leave stage one because they have fully integrated the Christian faith to be a stage one phenomenon. And any departure from stage one, they interpret as a departure from Christian faith. At this stage, I carry a belief that everything is either known or knowable. And that if I just could find the right authority figure who would give me the right answer, there are easy answers to every question. And I just want to avoid any authority figure who will give me wrong answers, or even worse, who isn't sure or isn't clear or doesn't know. And in stage one, then, authorities have this godlike power to give the right answers. In stage one, because of this sort of dichotomized world, a dualistic world, you can see why life would be a war. It's the battle between God and Satan, the good guys and the bad guys, light and darkness. And one of the most important things that happens in stage one is that we take sides. Now, I'm going to guess that a lot of people who are part of this webinar tonight are suspicious about stage one because they've seen a lot of the harm that comes from this kind of dualistic thinking. But I also think the reason we can afford maybe to be critical of stage one is that we take for granted that people have already chosen that they want to be on the right side in the war of life. I suppose if you can take that for granted, that's a nice luxury. In stage one, I find my identity in a dependent or even codependent relationship with my leader and my group. Who I am is who I follow and who I belong to. And in stage one, God is this ultimate authority figure, ultimate friend, again, in a very, very dualistic sense. All the good is with God and all the evil is apart from God. So, a lot of strengths in this stage. In this stage, people are highly committed. People are willing to sacrifice and suffer. Unfortunately, in this stage, people are also willing to inflict suffering on others for being wrong. People in other stages look at stage one people as being arrogant and simplistic and combative and judgmental and intolerant. Although people in stage one themselves don't see themselves this way at all. They see themselves as passionate and committed and clear and firm and strong. So stage one, it really lays the basis for so much that will follow. And I'm going to guess that the churches that we would typically call fundamentalist are the churches that really specialize in helping people in stage one. I would say the churches that we often call liberal or progressive are churches that have a problem with stage one people and see their arrogance and combativeness and oversimplification and vilification of others and so on. And one of the great challenges for more conservative churches is to believe that there's something beyond stage one. But one of the great challenges for more liberal or progressive churches is to realize that there is something essential and necessary that comes in stage one. So very, very challenging and important place to begin is stage one. And I think in the spiritual life, what happens in stage one is some people become aware that that there is this thing called the spiritual life. And the right thing to do is to become conscious of God. The right thing to do is to believe in God. The right thing to do is to pray and attend church and so on. And other people, by the way, are being taught the right thing to do is to be an atheist. The right thing to do is to be an agnostic. The right thing to do, etc. And so you can see how stage one can go one way or the other. And one of the great challenges for all of us involved in Christian ministry is to find ways to help stage one people, meet them where they are, and then help them when the time comes to move beyond stage one. As I said before, I think many people live in stage one their whole lives. My friend Richard Rohr, who's written about a lot of these matters as I have, Richard says that two things typically knock us out of stage one: great love and great pain or great suffering. I would also add a lot of travel and exposure to a lot of different kinds of people. Diversity tends to do that. So I want to stop there, and I want to first just notice that that in Saskatoon you're having some trouble with audio. Is that still feeling muddy there? Can I hear from Saskatoon? I'm just going to check and see if the volume's up all the way. I've got that volume all the way up. Can we hear from any of the other guests? Are you having trouble with audio? Okay, so I'll continue to try to speak up and be as clear as I can. St. Paul's, maybe you can let us know if you have any suggestions on how we can improve things. Looks like we've got things are pretty clear for everybody else. I also want to pause here, maybe while the St. Paul's folks are working on the audio. Any questions or comments about stage one before I continue? When we get to the later stages, if you want to come back and ask something about stage one, feel free. Let's see what we can do here. Any questions anybody like to send in at this point? Well, I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'll take a longer break when we come to after stage two. But as I said, great pain and great love and just exposure to broadening experiences often drives people out of stage one and brings us into stage two. I'm just seeing that to St. Paul's, it sounds like Brian is eating his mic. That's interesting. So I'm going to press on here. Stage two, we're going to call stage one simplicity, and stage two, we're going to call complexity. And now what happens is life stops being about just twos, us and them, good and evil. This is the stage of, in some ways, it's the stage of classification. There are many ways to do things. There are many ways to see things. There's more than one right way. And in stage two, I start focusing less on who's right and who's wrong, and I focus on who's winning and who's losing. And I start to realize that if I only see two sides to things, I'm going to lose sometimes. And in stage two, I really want to win. I really want to succeed. And so I shift from a dualistic focus to a pragmatic focus. I really want to get ahead and make things work. We can imagine in stage one, people saying, I want to be part of a church that is the right church. It's the true church. It's the legitimate church. By the way, if I'm conservative, I'll say I want the true conservative church. And if I'm progressive, I might say I want the true progressive church. But you can be stage one either way. But now when I get to stage two, I'm thinking, I want to be a part of a church that helps me to live my life in a better way. I want to be part of a church that helps me become a better person. Because now I'm seeing that the authorities are the people who know how to get things done and know how to teach me how to get things done too. I'm really looking for a coach and an authority figure. Now, I want you to think about leadership in churches and think about the people who are attracted to a pastor or a preacher or leaders who can help them learn how to have a better marriage, learn how to be better parents, learn how to be a better employee, learn how to pray, learn how to be open and close and in touch with God, learn how to pursue the fruits of the Spirit, and so on. This sort of thing really is attractive in stage 2 because now there's a sense that life is a game and I've got to learn the rules and I've got to learn the skills so I can make this work as effectively as possible. Now I'm going to find my identity in the things that I can do, in my cause or in my achievement. And in this stage, I'm going to become increasingly independent because I want to be able to do things on my own. I don't know how many of you were involved with youth groups or campus ministries where the focus was, here's how to read the Bible on your own. Here's how to pray on your own. Here's how to practice spiritual disciplines on your own. Anything that gets you doing things on your own is very, very appealing to stage 2 people because they're at this stage now. They want to get things done, and obviously God now is the coach who's helping me to succeed. This is a great stage for enthusiasm and idealism and action. My guess is that in a lot of our churches, the people who are the key lay leaders are in stage 2 because they want to get things done. They want to help. They like action, not just opinion. And later, people at later stages, and also people in stage 1, look at stage 2 people and think they're a little naive, or they're too superficial, or they're too pragmatic. But stage people, again, stage 2 people don't feel that way. They feel, I am trying to cope with the complexities of life so I can find a way to really make my life work. Now, it makes sense that this would be a stage that we would come into as we're moving from adolescence to adulthood, because adulthood is about independence. And it would make sense that this is the kind of spirituality then that young adults are very, very, not only attracted to, this is what they feel they need. They don't want to spend the rest of their lives being told what's right and wrong. They want to do something with it. And they're willing to grapple with complexity at this point. So let me stop there, and I'm interested in some feedback, some questions, some comments that would come through from some of you all about stage 1 and stage 2. I'll just ask you all one quick question. If you were to think about your church, maybe you could tell us whether you're thinking about your local church or your denomination. What percentage of people do you think are in stage 1? What percentage do you think are in stage 2? So I'd love to hear from some folks. A comment from Cheryl, an initial thought is there seems to be a lot of stage 1 expression in the Bible. I think that's certainly the case. For example, thou shalt not, no one can serve 2 masters. He'll either hate one or love the other. That's the kind of language that stage 1 people really, really like. It's interesting to think about what would be stage 2 type things that people would notice in the Bible. I'll give you an example. A stage 2 person reads about the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and they love that because they're 9 fruits of the Spirit, and they want to memorize all 9. They want to know what they are. They want to know how to go after them, and so there's a lot of stage 2 material in the Bible too. Some other questions or comments? We're about to hear from several people here. Another question? Or Leslie says, I interact with a lot of non-church and atheists. It seems to be a lot of stage 1 and stage 3 in this place. This is a really great point. There are, when there's been this big fight in recent years between believers and the quote new atheists, one of the interesting characteristics about some of the very outspoken new atheists is that they are speaking in stage one type terms. So someone writes a book, God is not great. Those are fighting words. That's the God delusion. It's either real or it's a delusion. And whether these folks really are stage one or they are sort of speaking that language because they want to pull the chain of more fundamentalist believing folks, I don't know. But it's a really interesting question. As some of us move into later stages, how do we stay in touch with the stage one people especially? And I'll just give you one or two quick thoughts on that, Leslie. One is the stage one people they need reassurance that you haven't defected, because since they see the world divided between us and them, if an atheist says, "Oh no, you've gone over to the light side," or however they might say it, one of the things you have to say to them is, "I really appreciate our friendship, even if we disagree. I really want to stay in touch." So I think reassurance that I still want to be part and I still want to be in a relationship becomes important for stage one people, because that's not entirely natural for them. I think for the stage two folks, they really want to know not only that we haven't written them off because we've switched sides in their mind, but with the stage two people, anytime we can tell them what we're learning, a stage two person is impressed that you're still thinking, that you're still learning, that you're reading, and that kind of a thing. That, I think, will reassure them that you're still okay. Barb says in the church where I'm in ministry, there'd be about 25% of people in stage one, maybe 50% in stage two. And it's hard to find common ground with the folks who are still in stage one and not offend them. This is exactly right. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of times our denominations segregate, and we have all stage one denominations, because they find it a little hard to deal with the stage two people. I'll tell you one of the things that conspires against them, Barb, is that if stage one people do a good job, their kids are ready for stage two as soon as they become young adults. In other words, they've learned all the stage one stuff and they're ready to move on. And so very often stage one parents have stage two kids, and if they want their kids to be part of the church, they have to find ways to make more room for them. Josephine is going to introduce a poll. What percentage of people in your congregation do you think there would be in stage one? Let's just get we'll get a quick reply on that. That would be interesting to see. So we're seeing significant percentages. A lot for stage one. So it's in churches like the United Church of Canada and so on. I think they have tried very hard to make room for people beyond stage one. But the fact is, we have so many people in our world who are born into stage one and never leave it, that we all are going to have to get better and better at learning how to understand and help stage one people. And one of the best things we can do is realize some of the values of stage one that we talked about already, and not vilify people for being where they are. I'm going to. We can keep that poll up and see, but it looks like we've got pretty good percentages of people in stage one. I'm going to move ahead now, and we've talked about stage one, and then this move into stage two. But I would say something happens to some people that moves them out of stage two and into stage three. If I could say it this way, university undergraduate years are great stage two years because we're learning complexity. But graduate school very often is a stage 3 phenomenon. And so when we start moving beyond complexity, where our need for coaching and our need for how-tos, and in some ways we connect to God because of our need for help and how we succeed in life, when we move beyond that to stage 3, we are in a very, very different realm. I think my friend Richard Rohr talks about spirituality in the first half of life and in the second half of life. And in the second half of life, that begins in this stage 3. And what starts to happen in Perplexity is that that all of those easy answers that we got in stage 1 and all of those easy steps, 5 steps to a good marriage, all that kind of thing, that helped us so much in stage 2. In stage 3, we start to doubt all of it. We just think, oh, that's just somebody's opinion. And at this point, we're concerned not so much with are you right or wrong, or are you a winner or a loser. Now we want to know, are you honest? Are you honest about the complexities? Are you honest about the problems? And if stage 1 is dualistic and stage 2 is pragmatic, we could say that stage 3 is relativistic. This is the great stage of critical thinking, where we learn to question our long-held assumptions. And we've gone from thinking that everything is known or knowable to thinking that little is known or knowable. And there are some days when people say nothing is known or knowable. And now the people we consider good are the ones who are willing to question authority and challenge authority and doubt. And you can see what a different stage 3 is from the earlier 2. Now, I have a deep suspicion about authority figures. They're trying to control people. They're trying to take advantage of people. And now I'm highly, highly suspicious of authority figures. If I'm in a good place, I'll say life is a mystery in stage 3. But if I'm in a rough place, I'll say life is a joke. And very often, I might say life is a mystery in the morning and life is a joke in the afternoon, because this can be a very, very conflicted and difficult time in life for a lot of people. Although a lot of people reach stage 3, probably some in their teens, a lot in their 20s, and a lot of people really never leave stage 3 for the rest of their lives. Now I find my identity either in solitude or among a small band of similarly alienated friends. And this little band of friends, we're the ones who see through everything. We're the ones who question everything. And in some ways, our existence and identity as a group depends on there being some other group that we either mock or we define ourselves in opposition to. And I think there are churches that are primarily stage 3 churches, and a big part of their identity is we're not fundamentalists like those guys, or that you meet some Protestants who look at Catholics as the stage 1 people, and they're different than the Catholics. You meet some charismatics who see themselves as different from the non-charismatics, and there's this sort of sense of alienation. You also see this a lot in people who've dropped out of church because they had a bad experience, and they're still defined by their bad experience. And now I'm very ambivalent about God in stage 3. I've outgrown God in some ways, or maybe now this is the great stage of people discovering the contemplative life and contemplative spirituality. They don't necessarily embrace it at this point, but they might start becoming interested in some kind of experiential approach to God that in some ways that moves beyond all the words of complexity and all the simplistic answers of stage 1. Great strengths in the stage. I mean, this is the stage of critical thinking, and this is the stage of deep and honest, penetrating thought. This is a stage where people care a lot about justice and injustice. But people in this stage can be cynical and uncommitted and withdrawn. and it's pretty hard to build a church of stage 3 people because they need somebody to be against, and they're not high on enthusiasm and hope because they're in that kind of critical thinking, maybe we'd say deconstruction mode. Obviously, if there is a stage 4, it's going to take a stage 3 to get us there because something has to pry us out of the first 2 stages where life in some ways is bolted down pretty tightly. And I think that we have very, very few churches that help people in stage 3. And we have even fewer churches that help people ever get beyond stage 3. In other words, the ones that make room for stage 3 people very often become the band of alienated people and don't really offer them much beyond that. Now, in the spiritual life in stage 3, there's a sense where you can make a case that faith really begins in stage 3, because when I go beyond my capacity to know, and I'm willing to trust something beyond my capacity to know. I mean, in a real sense, you can see this is where a new kind of faith begins, a new level of faith begins. So let me just take a quick pause there. Any comments or feedback on this stage 3, and any observations on what you see of this in your congregation or denomination? The point, if great pain and great love move us beyond stage 1, what moves us beyond stage 2? Well, Leslie, what I should have said is it's great pain and great love that move us both beyond stage 1 and 2, and are willing, that make us willing to venture into perplexity in stage 3. But one of the other things that, I'll tell you a number of other things that nudge people into perplexity. If they have an authority figure, a pastor, a mentor, a parent, who they really trusted, and that person has a big moral failure or has some huge lapse, the disillusionment of watching a trusted authority figure fail often thrusts people into perplexity. Honestly, for a lot of people, it's divorce that launches them into perplexity, because in some ways marriage was the thing that was the bottom line they had to win in. And in stage 2, when you really want to win, and then you stop winning at that thing, then suddenly you're thrust out of the zone of winning, and you have to look at things in a fresh way. Often unemployment pushes people into this third stage. One other thing I would say spiritually is the encounter with people of very, very different faiths very often is what plunges people out of complexity into perplexity. Because suddenly I think, wow, here I've been a Christian all my life, and now here's a Muslim who seems to be a better, deeper person, more in touch with God than I am, or it could, it can go in any direction there. But the encounter with the other often pushes people into stage 3. Now, I'll talk in a minute about what pushes us beyond stage 3. Any other questions or comments, Craig? Okay, this concept of how stage 3 moves us toward faith. Craig, maybe I could say it like this. If I'm a 12-year-old child, and all the authority figures who I look up to and trust say there is a God, in some ways, everything I know because authority figures told me so. So in a way, my belief that there is a continent called Antarctica, and there is a planet called Jupiter, and there is a God in heaven, they're all on the same level because I've accepted all of them based on the testimony of authority figures. And in some ways, even in stage 2, although I've started questioning the more authoritarian authority figures, I'm still deeply indebted to coaches. But when I come to stage 3 and I really start doubting not only specific authority figures, but the very idea of anybody having authority. So I have to question things on my own. You can see how this pushes me to really make my faith my own. This is, I think, in terms of human development, it's one of the great failures of a lot of our religious communities, because we want people to get this kind of faith by authority, and we don't pay enough attention to their developing of faith by conviction and experience. And so I don't know if that helps, but that, I think, takes us in that direction. Any other? We've got several people coming in with questions. I'm going to move on in just a minute, but we'll see if we've got a couple other questions. Leslie asks, is it an overreach to say that we're in a stage 3 era, crisis of authority? Well, Leslie, I think you're in the United States. But let me say this for the Canadians. I think if you live in Vancouver or Toronto, it would be a lot more safe to say you're in stage 3 than if you're maybe in Alberta, where the economy is really good and there's an awful lot of tar sands out there and things are looking really, really good economically, and if you're, although I know this is less and less true, I'm thinking about that TV show in Canada, A Little Mosque on the Prairie. But, if you live in a town where everybody's white, or where, everybody is from a Christian background of some sort, it's still pretty easy to be in stage 1 and stage 2. That's intensified by the existence of things like, cable news channels and internet portals, where all the stage 1 people can stay together and never have to confront anybody who's different from them, except that they'll talk to one another about what those other evil people are like. But I think among college-educated people, this is one of the great realities, is if you have more and more college-educated people, you're going to have more and more people moving into stage 3, because one of the things that undergraduate education is about is teaching critical thinking, and critical thinking pushes us towards stage 3. Barb raises the question, isn't this why it's so scary for people to realize they have to be more responsible for their own faith? And yes, I think it's a double-edged sword in my experience, Barb, because on the one hand, stage 2 people want to become more responsible for their own faith, but stage 3 people then end up really, in some ways, on their own, and probably some days they wish they could go back to when there were authority figures who could really help them. Ruth asks, isn't Occupy, Idle No More, etc., a sign of stage 3? Well, yes, that's a great comment, that there are these questions of the standard narratives that are running society, and they become deconstructive narratives, which are very much take us into this zone of perplexity. For the sake of time, I just want to move on here and then say, well, what about stage 4? And Leslie asked earlier, what would drive someone out of stage 3? And if we had time, it'd be fun to get all of your answers to that. But I think one of the things that drives people out of stage 3 is they actually have to live, They have to make choices. What am I going to do? Who am I going to be with? What value system am I going to live by? Really gets intensified when you have children. What am I going to tell my children? What values am I going to pass on to my children? And that pushes us into the stage 4, which we could call humility, because in stage 4, we lose some of that arrogance of stages 1 and 2, and we then start to lose the arrogance of stage 3, realizing that we're in the human predicament and we actually have to live a life. And so it really is a stage of humility. I'm going to call it a stage of harmony, though, because in stage 4, we're trying now to put all the strengths of stages 1, 2, and 3 together. There's a kind of reassessment that happens in stage 4 that says, can I harmonize dualism with pragmatism? Can I harmonize dualism and pragmatism with critical thinking and relativism? Is there a way that these things can not be, I have to choose this one and then reject that one, but can they be integrated? And as a Christian, this is when I love to find some very simple statements, seek first God's kingdom and everything you need will be taken care of. Love God, love your neighbors. On this hangs all the law and the prophets. I look for these grand essentials that in some ways I can recover a stage one like commitment to. While around a whole lot of other things, I can acknowledge complexity. And I am able to hold everything with a certain kind of humility that I gained from being in that stage of perplexity. Now I'm focused not on is this right or wrong, or win or lose, or just honest or dishonest, but now I've got to make wise decisions. Is this wise or unwise? Will this fulfill my potential, or will this reduce my potential? Will this work for the common good? Will this be a problem for the common good? And I'm now wanting to make some kind of a contribution to the bigger picture, because in some ways, having passed through this stage 3 of being an isolated individual, maybe even an alienated individual, in this stage, I'm reconnecting with the human race, including all those stage 1 and stage 2 people that bugged the heck out of me when I was in stage 3. So this is a stage of integration and synthesizing and having some sort of empathy for people in the other stages. I'm able now to say that life is a war in some ways, and life is a game in some ways, and life is a quest in some ways. And now I'm able to live in this sense of being a quest. And I've lost this us-them dichotomy that's quite strong, the us who's right, them who's wrong in stage 1. Us who wins, them who loses in stage 2. Us who's honest and true to ourselves, them who is dishonest and conventional. Now I get to the sense where no, you know what, we're all human beings and we have to make this work somehow. And now I can start to see that authorities are just human beings. And now in stage 4, I start to have the sense that life is what you make it. And if I'm a person of faith, life is what you make it with God's help. And in stage 4 now, I move from dependence to independence to counterdependence to now in stage 4, interdependence. And now I have, in some ways, I arrive at a way of thinking about God that is built around words like yet. A friend of mine said, in stage 4, orthodoxy becomes paradoxy, because everything for us now is, we expect to hold truths in tension. And in stage 4, now I can start to consolidate those great strengths of the earlier stages and add some humility and stability and so on. And I can have the weaknesses of earlier stages too in stage 4. And so in stage 4 now, I find through connection through affection. Now I'm not fighting people all the time. I'm trying to understand them. I can say, well, that's where they are. And now there's a sense where I can be connected with other people through affection. And maybe this is the stage where I begin to have some kind of affection for God too, because now I've come to terms with the fact that these stages are necessary and there's some natural development to them. It's probably a good point for me to stop and just a couple minutes to see if you have any questions or comments about this 4th stage. And this is a good point to ask anything about the previous stages. So let me open it up there. Question or comment from anybody? Well, while you're thinking about that, let me ask you all a question. I wonder if you could take stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and now give some sort of just off the cuff percentages. I think my church is 25, 25, 25, 25, or 90, 10, 0, 0, or how would you make a statement of that for your congregation or your denomination? Or you might want to say the Protestant church in Canada or something. I'd love to hear some of your reflections just obviously just thinking off the top of our heads, but if those start to make sense to you, it'd be interesting to hear what you're thinking. Maybe I shouldn't ask a question that requires that much thought because our time is limited, but I'd very much like to hear what you all think. So Bob looks at, we've got about 75% in stage 1 and stage 2, and maybe 5% at stage 4. That's interesting. And Josephine's put up another way to do this. That's a good way to. That's a good way for a lot of us to put in our data there. I'm interested, Barb, that for you it looks like about 5% in stage 4. Another question that this raises is what happens to the stage 4 people? Do they leave the church, do you think? When do you think people leave the church? Are they dropping out when they go from stage 2 to stage 3? I think, especially for a lot of our mainline Protestant and Roman Catholic denominations that are having so many people drop out, I think this little schema can help give some sense to why that's happening. We'll get some feedback from a couple of other people, and then it'll be interesting to move on. Another recent article, Karen says about why youth not in church, and it sounds very much like stage 3 reasons. Yes, many of you probably seen the book "You Lost Me," written by Dave Kinnaman and some others, and I think "You Lost Me." It's about why young adults leave church. Focus more on evangelical churches, but I think it's that stage 2 to stage 3 juncture where people just say, I don't fit in here anymore. There's not room here for people like me. Cheryl raises a question. I wonder if the minister is in stage 4 and the congregation is in stage 1. That's really interesting because especially in our denominations that require seminary, and seminary is like graduate school. So we would expect that almost any pastor who has done well in seminary will be in either stage 3 or stage 4. And now we've got this huge gap. I think what happens in a lot of cases is that the pastor just fakes it, pretends to be stage 1 or stage 2 for the people, or they just kind of try to not, this is where pastors become nice and sentimental and maybe superficial, because if they say what they really think, they are worried that they'll alienate their congregations. We're at this time where we desperately need advanced stage 4 pastors who know how to speak the language of stage 1 and stage 2 people, who understand stage 1 people really need to be told, this is right, this is wrong, you need to make a choice, and find ways to do that that feel honest to them. So this is some really great points here. Well, I want to take just our last couple minutes, and I'd like to explore how and one more question. How important is the sense of vulnerability in moving through the stages? That's a very good question. I think stage 1 people don't feel very vulnerable. Although if they don't yet know all the right answers, I suppose that's their main feeling of vulnerability. But the stage 3 people really feel vulnerable, and they feel anybody who wants to attack them, they're kind of an open target. Some of them can be aggressive back, and they don't mind stirring it up. But I think in our churches, stage 3 people really feel vulnerable. Stage 3 people really appreciate it if someone preaches an honest sermon on the book of Job, that talks about the complexities and perplexity of Job, or honest sermon on the book of Ecclesiastes, or read Psalms like Psalm 77 or Psalm 88 that are stage 3 kind of Psalms where faith is disintegrating right in the middle of the Psalm. And that's where this term naked spirituality comes in, because if we start to realize that there is a process going on like this, and in some ways it's a process of stripping away. When we get to stage 3, there's a stripping away of a lot of the information and certainty and easy answers that we've accumulated along the way. That's what then makes us able to enter into a stage 4 kind of spiritual life, where we've stripped so much away, and we find out there really is something there. There really is this thing called faith there. There really is this spiritual vitality there. By the way, just in this little slide, you can see how those 4 stages, I sort of color-coded them with a lot of the theorists on development. Couple comments on the stages before I move on. What happens after stage 4? I think harmony becomes the new simplicity, and then people go through the stages again, and you can imagine how that would happen. And I think after you go through the stages once or twice, it just becomes you're comfortable with all of these stages and all of the processes of dualism, pragmatism, relativism, and integration. And I think a lot of groups that we would call cults or toxic kind of faith groups end up being these groups that won't allow anyone to go beyond stage 1. And I think a lot of our denominations of parachurch groups are really great at helping people in one stage, but don't do so well after that. It's very hard to lead anyone in a stage beyond your own. If you're a stage 2 person and you have stage 4 people in your congregation, they're probably cooperating with you to try to help you, because you don't even know what they see that you don't see. Let me stop. Leslie asks, if stage 3 is when you discover that not everything can be known, does stage 4 bring an increased tolerance for not knowing? And I think this is exactly right. This is one of the reasons why, here comes an interesting problem when we're dealing with issues of multi-faith relations. And obviously, because of my more recent book, this is a big concern of mine. Stage 4 people have the capacity to see good in other faiths. They have capacity to see development in other faiths. Stage 1 people, not so much. So stage 4 people can very confidently tell stage 1 people something like this. If you want to be a good Christian, you must love your neighbor as yourself. And that includes if your neighbor is a Muslim or an atheist or whatever. So, you can give a clear answer to a stage 1 person. And then in the whole area of not knowing and kind of spiritual nakedness, this is something that I think maybe a stage 1 or stage 2 person feels for 15 minutes when they're out under the stars looking at a starry night, and they feel the vastness of the universe, but it's terrifying to them to actually inhabit that kind of nakedness and not knowing. But I think for stage 4 people, I think this becomes, they actually sense in this an encounter with God that is very, very meaningful. I'm just going to say that I think we will gain a lot if we look at Jesus with this scenario in mind. I think we can start to see in Jesus a lot of examples of modeling working with people in each stage. And we can be patient with people as they're moving through these stages. And I hope that this understanding might help a lot of you in your work with people at many, many different stages to try to accept them where they are and help them move forward. Maybe we can help people get a vision that this is what it means to be a Christian disciple. Since a disciple is a learner, we can help people see there's a lifelong learning process. I also should say that I think there is a stage 0. We might call it the stage of egocentricity, where it's all about me and where everything is on what I like. This would be the stage of narcissism. And, this is, we met an awful lot of people like this who, even though they're adults, they have this very narcissistic and egocentric way of living. And I think it will help all of us to be more patient with stage one people if we realize that they are way ahead of stage zero people. And maybe this will help us to see that stage one, really is a step up and offers something special. Well, if we had another hour, I'll tell you what I would love to do. And all of these slides are available. But if we had time, then we could really now start to say, what will spirituality look like at each of these four stages? It will look different. If we could get down to the real core, what would it really look like? That is a big part of what I tried to explore in the book. And what I worked on in the book is I tried to say, well, what would be the practices that a stage one person in simplicity would be ready for? And I talked about three key practices, and I tried to center each of these practices in a single word. First, the word here, which is the practice of presenting ourselves to God and being awake to God's presence. Thanks, obviously, the practice of becoming grateful for all the blessings that we're so prone to take advantage of. And O, which is the word of wonder, which if we can help stage one people realize that at the core of faith is worship, and at the core of worship is realizing that God is greater than anything we can understand. In that way, we put a door at the end of stage one, so we make it easier for people to move beyond stage one. In stage two, complexity, we help people do the practices that are very much involved with personal growth, sorry, confession, admitting we're wrong, help, learning how to acknowledge our own weaknesses and limitations so that we turn to God to ask God for power and strength and wisdom beyond our own. And please, the practice of compassion, where we start to, in a sense, join God in compassion for the other. Stage three has very important practices as well, but these are the practices that I find we talk about the least. Talk about nakedness. These are the practices that involve us stripping away so many of the things that we've depended on. When is the acknowledging our unfulfillment? When will I find fulfillment? When will my prayers be answered? When will this time of darkness end? No, the practice of refusal. I can't stand this. I won't accept this. This is not acceptable. And then why? Not the why of saying, I demand an answer, but the why that says, I don't know why. I don't have an answer. But the practice of abandonment and the practice of complete resignation, that where we truly acknowledge our not knowing. And then I think we get to stage four, and that's where we learn maybe what we typically call more contemplative practices. The practice, I call it of behold, of meditation, of a kind of post-dualist seeing. The practice of yes, the deep kind of surrender of our lives and wills to the light, to the will of God. And then those three dots represent contemplation. The ability to simply be in the presence of God beyond words, beyond thought, where we learn simply to be in companionship with God. And I don't know, I'd be interested in your reactions and what you all think. I know our time is just about up. But I'll tell you why this way of thinking about the spiritual life both has helped me personally and also helped me as a pastor and in the work I do now with Christian leaders. If we can help people realize that there is a lifelong process of spiritual growth, and we realize that part of the role of a church is to help people where they are, but at the very beginning give them a vision that when you're done here, there'll be something waiting for you here, and then there'll be something waiting for you here, and so on. I think this is one of the things somehow that we lost, especially in our Protestant traditions. And I think it's something that we desperately need to regain. Well, I'll stop there. We have a few minutes and see if we have some questions as we conclude our time. Barb, uh, your words have given lots to think about. It makes me want to work harder with the folks who are in stage one at our church to help them see the door and know that they can move forward. That's beautifully put. Thank you very much, Barb.
Thank you very much, Brian, and I'm sorry I've lost some of our participant comments by switching the screen layout that way, but do continue to express your feedback, and thanks to Brian. Brian, I really enjoyed this way of looking at spirituality, and especially the cyclicalness of it. So it's not that any of us has progressed further or is further ahead, but that we all are in different stages, that spirituality is a movement, a process of growth that we're all involved in and in different stages at various points in our lives. So I very much appreciate that, and also your pastor's heart for journeying with people in our congregations, the people we're in ministry with, on their own spiritual journeys.
Thank you, Justine. I should say, if there are...
We've got, where can we...
Yeah, I was just going to say, if there are comments coming up, I can't see them now, so that's... There we go. Now I can see them. Great.
They should have transferred over. Yeah. So Brian does have a blog, and it's found at brianmclaren.net. The title, the link is at the top right of your screen, and actually it's not a link. You will have to copy and paste that. Unfortunately, I can't make that an active link in that format. But Brian does welcome you to continue the conversation by following his blog on the website. We also ask for your...
Well, can I just say one other thing, Josephine? I should have mentioned before, a lot of people in church ministry have said, how can we use these practices in this understanding in our church life, our liturgical life? And if you go on my website, there's a page for naked spirituality, and then there's a link to another website where all kinds of people have been contributing some beautiful resources, and all of you are welcome to use those resources, but you might also want to contribute to them too. So that could be some other information that's helpful. But there's a link from the site on the Naked Spirituality page.
Thank you very much, Brian. And just a couple of other reminders before we sign off. One, that the recording